first link. And basically the link is going to link to a collaboration that we did last year. And in that collaboration, you'll see about 100 different resources that people shared. Some of them are websites, games, activities, and such. And then obviously what people sent in this year as well. And then whatever anybody shares, I'll be adding it as we go along. The share screen is on, so if anybody would like, and just real quickly, in sharing the Wakelet before too many people come in, and share a screen.
So what you have in the Wakelet right now are like web-based things, right? Or are these things from teachers too?
There's things from teachers as well. So here are the web-based things: YouTube, games, Google Docs, breakouts, activities, Iron Chef, and then linking it to last year's collaboration that we did. And then we're going to do a collaboration next week on world history. So videos that we did, and then link to Amanda Sandoval's stuff that she shared, some breakouts, and more. So everything is going to be in the Wakelet, and then whatever anybody else shares. And here's the link again. So everyone have a good summer or a good school year. We still have a few more days till the bitter end. Literally.
I don't know how you're still teaching right now. Like, I can't even imagine it right now. I can't imagine going into June. Like, wow.
Huh. Yeah.
Do you do year-round school down there, Gabe?
No, we're delayed 4.5 weeks, so now we've got to make up the time.
Oh.
Normally
like you
we're out
delayed
at
it in the
Memorial.
beginning?
Pardon?
Y'all delayed it in the beginning?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think we did, and so did Dallas. And the rest, I think pretty much everyone else out in the metro is already done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just got out last Friday. I'm in Chicago, so we just started too.
That's nice.
My seniors left
Friday.
a month ago.
A month?
Yeah.
Nice.
We were done.
I started to go, it was like every day I had an extra, block of no students. So I got so much done.
Yeah, our graduation was a full month ago, actually a month and a couple of days. So it is crazy to me when you all are like, oh, we're still in class. I'm like, whoa.
I know.
Nope.
Thank you everyone for joining. So I don't know if anyone wants to get started. I'll go ahead and go on mute. Share screen is available, and I'll just focus on the chat and anything anybody shares, as well as the waiting room.
I'll share first. I'm also cleaning up dinner, and I just got out of my attic. Our attic fan broke, so I was like sitting up there with like a lantern, and my dad was like trying to get me through that. So sorry that I'm moving all around. I just have like 8,000 chores that I wasn't expecting. So during the year, when we study judicial review, I teach US 1, and I try to get as much US 2 in as I can, because our kids take US 1 in 8th grade, and then we're K through 12, so they don't take US 2 until 11th grade. So there's like a nice big gap, and also they ask about current events all the time, and it's really hard to explain what's going on like now with like by completely skipping anything that happened between 1865 and now. So so when we do Marbury versus Madison and judicial review, we did Marbury v. Madison. They did like an Instagram thing on that. That was really cute. But then to explain the importance of judicial review and how it goes into their real lives, I have them do some research. So it's a pretty like standard project, but the whole reason I wanted to share it with you was because we do cases that like a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, you broached that? And I'm like, yeah, of course we do. So I'll share the, hold on, I'll share the link to that in the chat, and then I'll share my screen. Microsoft Word. Is that even Word? No, that's not Word. That's why I can't find it. Here we go. Share. So, sorry, everybody. You think I'd been doing this all year, I'd be a little faster. So I call it judicial review in real life. So after they study Marbury versus Madison, the essential question that they go through, and this takes them about a week because they're in 8th grade, are what are some consequences of judicial review and why does it demonstrate who has privilege and who does not? And I realize that like the word privilege might be like hot in some of your schools at this moment in time, and you might have to like kind of like get in the proximity of using that word, and you might not be able to. But then I split them up into groups, and I give them the questions of each of these cases. So they look at Plessy v. Ferguson, which they wouldn't look at in US 1. Then they look at the Ozawa and Singh cases, and those are interesting because they're both connected because Singh uses Ozawa as a precedent. They also use Lum v. Rice, and this also brings in Asian American history. Sorry, everybody. This brings in Asian American history, whereas it wouldn't actually be much a part of my curriculum. It also brings in Korematsu, which the kids find really interesting, and they have a debate over the words incarceration and internment. I use Loving v. Virginia, and then I also use Obergefell v. Hodges. So each group gets to read the question, and then I give them a little bit of background, and they get to choose which one they want to research. And they do some basic Wikipedia-ing research, but then I also give them these resources at the bottom so that they can get what the majority opinion in the case was, but they also have to look at the arguments of both sides. So when we used to do this, before I pulled these cases in, and we used to do like things like NJV TLO and like school cases, I would have them argue, but I don't want any child to have to argue on the side on the wrong side of history. So they don't do the arguments. They basically present the case. They presented the case to the group, and each group takes notes on each one in a graphic organizer. That basically says, what's the background of the case? What were the two arguments, and what was the Supreme Court's decision? And then if they choose to, and because they're in 8th grade, I make this a choice. I don't make it mandatory, but if I were teaching 11th graders or 10th graders, I would make it mandatory for them to find out if there were any dissenting opinions. And the whole point of doing all of these and them learning about each one is, number one, they're really interested, but number two, at the end, they answer this essential question. And they determine what privilege looks like throughout decades of American history, and they make a lot of connections. To what is going on now. So this year, I had them do it as a Google Slides and Padlet because they were hybrid, and it was just easier for them to collect and present information that way. In the past, they've done different things. Sometimes they've made videos. Sometimes they've just simply done posters. Sometimes we've carouseled around the room. So they would make a presentation and then they would go to each booth. So there are lots of different ways to do this. The least fun way is the hybrid way. But I'm really proud of my students for being able to answer this question in the end. And like, what's nice about it too, is that the question is also open to some of the kids who disagree. So like there are some kids who disagree, who I can't influence, because that's what our position is, who say like, yeah, these cases were not good, but I don't think judicial review demonstrates privilege at all, and here's why. And that opens up a conversation between that student and the rest of their classmates, so that classmate in particular who just can't get past that gets a different point of view from the people who are in the room, because I teach students of Japanese descent, students of Chinese descent, students who are Sikh, students who are LGBTQ plus, and perhaps their parents are. So it gives a way for kids to see and be seen, and I really like it. So I hope that it is useful for you in some way.
That's really amazing. Do you go by Cheryl or Cheryl Ann?
Cheryl Ann.
Cheryl Ann, where do you teach? What part of the country?
New Jersey, Montclair Kimberly
Okay.
Academy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would be taken to the school board for using these cases. I teach in Texas in a small town called Waxahachie or Midlothian. And this is amazing and fantastic. And I could never present it this way. And it's a shame, right?
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I would be in some trouble.
And I mean, I do get backlash from like a couple of parents, but because I teach where I teach, and I'm the department chair, and then my admin is behind me, and I'm like, hey, if you don't like it, you can have discussions about it around your dinner table, but what I'm doing in my classroom.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could.
Me too.
So Susan, just to kind of jump on that, if you had a larger selection of cases for your kids to choose from, do you think you'd run into the same thing? If you chose some of the more, if you threw Heller in there or whatever, do you think then you'd be a little more open?
Yeah, 100%. And just to be kind of straight up, I am married to a woman. So, and I'm completely out and open in my district. I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
And I used to teach in Arlington, which is 30 minutes north of where I am now. Gabriel knows where that is. And it was a completely different story, which is amazing, 30 minutes down the road. And I found myself now in a situation where I could never bring up these cases because they would rather me definitely teach this concept without bringing in all the other cases. So that's what I do. So I wouldn't be able to do that. But boy, this is a dream, really.
Do you teach US 1 or US 2?
1.
Okay. So if you went off the beaten path, they would
notice. Yes, they would notice, and they would have plenty of people up at this next school board meeting.
I'm really sorry.
Which is sad, which is really sad.
Well, even with US 1, I use quite a few modern cases, but I don't group them in that way. I basically say, here's a bunch of modern cases that have been in the news in the last however many years, and kids are free to kind of pick and choose what they want to go with from there. And even I'm in California, so that's one thing, but I'm in a pretty darn conservative city in California, and I've never had issues. Now, that said, other teachers in my school have had issues for all sorts of various reasons. So I think when you say, hey, these are a bunch of cases that had a big impact, kids are free to choose which case they want to look into. I think you can get to the same sorts of things, even in a less obvious case. You might be still able to get to those same core values and beliefs that people are trying to get to. So
you definitely can. And I took a seminar over the course of this year. And the way the presenter talked about it was like, listen, a lot of kids are really hungry to talk about these things, and sometimes they just can't, or you can't bring them up. So he used the word proximity. He's like, if you can get really close to it and then they make that jump, then that's like how you can like kind of sneak it in. Yeah. And it was just eye-opening for me too, because I feel like in a lot of ways I'm lucky. I mean, there's not a lot of things about New Jersey that stink, but like literally sometimes, but but like I feel really lucky that I can just outright say like this is it. But then there are other independent schools in New Jersey and other districts in New Jersey where I would get in a lot of trouble for doing what I do.
I'm not even allowed to show CNN 10. I know. I've been using it for like 25 years. Right?
And I came maddeningly centrist. Like
I came to this school, and something happened this year with some 6th grade teacher. And so then our principal said we can't show it. It's because it has the word CNN in it. You know, we all know that's terrible.
I told a kid if I would be happy to show a Fox and Friends teen version, but that hasn't happened yet. So.
I know. There's nothing else, and it's so I know. And I got into a big argument with the kid.
Well, I had a parent because I had a kid that was in my remote group, and I was putting the agenda for the day in Canvas, and I said watch CNN 10, and the parent. I mean, I got a parent email. Oh, what are you doing showing? And I was like, it's just news. It's okay, and it's just student news, and then. So then she proceeded to send me this like really long diatribe about how the problems with my philosophical approach to teaching. And I said, hold on a minute. And then I shared with her like allsides.com. And I was like, this is actually my standard. And so then she was much more relaxed. The crazy thing is I taught her older son. So I'm like, where is this coming from? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm in
Outrageous
Kansas, so I'm definitely got that conservative bug too. I just found, like with the more controversial topics, the key is to not push an agenda, but rather to just present information and then allow the kids to come to conclusions. But also, one of the things that saved me, particularly during the election, is one of the questions on the assignment was you have to ask your parents what they think. And so then I'm specifically involving the parents in the conversation so that they don't feel like I'm trying to push something on their kids.
That's a great
So far,
strategy.
I'm not the crazy liberal teacher, although my dad thinks I am, but I'm not. I swear, Dad, I'm not. But.
Well, and I think you can be if it's what, like you said, it's this idea of I'm presenting history and I am encouraging kids to discuss it and make a point and take a claim. You know, in California, it's the exact opposite. If you want to go and talk about George Washington as a good person, you're going to run into problems in California. You just are. And it's that same kind of thing where, you know, I don't have to say he's a good person. I can say, here's what George Washington did. You make the call. And that, I think, works both ways. And I think it's good. It's sad how defensive everybody is, and now then has to be as a result of everyone being so defensive. It makes everyone else have to be just as defensive because outrage is in. It's fun to be outraged. So yeah, it's disappointing. And it's the best part is the kids don't get that way for the most part. You'll have a few kids who do get really angry because their parents told them to, but most kids, I am amazed at the debates my students have. They get into some serious issues. They don't walk away angry at each other. They're happy to have the conversation. It's pretty cool when you get those limited moments to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I start with like really basic things like, are cats better than dogs? And it's funny how heated they can get about that. And then you throw in something like gun control, and then we're like, whoa,
yeah.
You get all fired up.
Don't do it. Don't do it in Texas.
Listen, I mentioned Texas. We always have a good throw in and throw down to Texas whenever we talk about guns.
Yeah. That's terrible.
Well, based on what Kevin was kind of saying, that kind of made me think of something I do at the beginning of the year. And this is kind of like an opening part of, like, my first unit is literally what is history. I teach 8th graders. And I'm in a pretty progressive community, but a lot of I'm the department head too, like Cheryl Ann was saying. A lot of my colleagues are still kind of very attached to like textbook teaching and things like that. So a lot of times when the students come to me, they're not really used to thinking about history in a more abstract way. It's very, concrete, very, memorization, rote learning type of thing. So one of the opening activities that I do is kind of to get into the thick of it right in the middle at the beginning of the year to look at how we have this historical narrative about certain people. And I do this hero versus villain assignment. And the goal of this is not actually to claim that someone is a hero or a villain in history. The goal is, after they do some research and they practice, writing a claim, supporting their claim with evidence, doing a CER, the goal is at the end of this, we kind of come together and we talk about why the evidence has, basis on both sides, and why this is important as we think historically. Why is it important to consider this both sides kind of argument? What does that do to our historical understanding of the time period? What does that do for our historical understanding of how narratives are created and shaped? And we kind of go back to that every year. So I'll share it. I know I have my Google. There's going to be 2 things in the folder, and I mean, you guys feel free to do what you want with them. But let me share.
You said it was hero versus what?
Hero versus villain. And the kids really like it because I made these little, I don't know if you can kind of see the little thumbnail of it, But basically I printed out these like hero cards and villain cards. So they go in small groups and they'll present their research to their small group, and they all get like this little flag that says hero on the one side and villain on the other, and then they vote. But like I said, that's not, they don't know, it's not the exact goal for the lesson. We kind of come to that later, but it really does help them develop their critical thinking skills very early on, and kind of sets up the expectation for what we do in class. So I do like to start with that. So I'll kind of share that, because I know this is all, I work on a Mac. So when I upload things to Google Drive, I don't convert them automatically. So when I share this with you guys, you'll probably have to download them. But the other thing you'll see in here, just in case you're interested, is I also, depending on the group of students, I also sometimes do this most important event of the 20th century. If I have a group of students who, when I talk to my colleagues at the younger grades, who are nowhere close to kind of thinking of things abstractly, then I have a little bit more of a leveled and more structured lesson that has a lot more scaffolding built in. Kind of that same idea, like why do we have different interpretations of what's important historically, but it's a little bit easier for them to determine and make an argument about versus the hero versus villain. So the end goal is still the same, it's just structured a little bit differently. So I'll share that with you all. Paste. All right. I have to work on converting all my stuff to docs. Once I make it, I'm like, all right, I don't want to look at it anymore. So I don't even bother. But yeah, so that's one of mine.
And I'll jump in and share kind of how I do a somewhat similar idea where they have to admit that there are two sides to many issues. So I do these things that I call weigh the evidence, and I do one per unit is what I've done with my 8th graders. And so here's just one I pulled up. This is the Washington one. And the difference between here and most of the other inquiries we do is that in a weigh the evidence, I tell them, your opinion doesn't matter in this one. Normally I tell them I'm more than happy to take your opinion, but what you've learned so far doesn't matter. What you will learn after this doesn't matter. It is a self-contained, we're looking at 6 documents, and you have to make a decision based just on those documents. And I very purposefully choose documents that go in both directions. So there's a single statement that they're evaluating throughout the lesson. So in this case, it is George Washington deserves to be honored on the $1 bill. So every document will either support that statement or refute that statement. And then they have to rate them numerically. And this is where I tell them, your opinion isn't going to matter. The math is going to determine your answer at the end. So however convinced they are by a given document, if they're super convinced, then they give it a 2, either a plus or a minus in either direction. If they're a little bit convinced, it's a 1. If it's not convincing or it's not a believable document, it's a 0. And then they have to defend their answers with short sentences, and we discuss as a class and all that. So the documents are pretty straightforward and simple. And this is actually modified from something that came from National Archives from DocsTeach. So they have a bunch of them online there as well. So this is just a slide from one of my lectures that I do with them. They don't get the whole lecture. They just have to base it on the one slide. And what does this tell you about George Washington? And so kids will be like, well, if he was wanted for assassination, if he was jailed at some point, well, obviously that kind of person doesn't deserve to be on a $1 bill. Now, some kids will try to jump in and say, but we know why he was jailed. He was in war. It was a this, it was a that. And I'm like, doesn't matter. Right now, it doesn't matter. Just based on the information you have, how would you rate this thing? So they're all like that. There's a C-SPAN poll based on rating the president. Editorial, one of the wonderful anti-federalist editorials from the time period talking about this guy celebrating the retirement of George Washington, how it's the greatest day in American history. And it just shocks the kids. They're like, wait, people at the time felt this way? I'm like, yeah, not everybody's ever going to love anyone. It doesn't happen. So they get through all that. And then at the end, they write their CER based only on those documents. And they have to pick the side of the argument that their numbers came out. So when they add up all their numbers at the end, if they got a positive anything, they have to argue yes, even if they disagree with it. If they got a negative anything, they have to argue no, even if they personally disagree with it. And it really pushes them to recognize that it kind of does a media bias thing as well. Like I could paint any picture I want with the documents that I choose, with the information that I choose, but it really does help them to see how other people could reach a different conclusion than they do. So I got a whole bunch of those on mrroten.com, so I'll link those in the chat. But it's a simple, pretty straightforward kind of thing, but they go really, really well.
Kevin, I know you just put out your book. You want to do a quick little like 3-minute, why do I need to buy your book kind of stuff?
So if you want to be inspired after this horrible year that we all went through, that's why you need to buy it. It's very fun. It's very inspirational. All the nuts and bolts stuff is already on the website. This is more about why you should want to dig into the nuts and bolts stuff and have some fun with it. So I would say it's very inspirational. It's a lot of fun. And if you've never been to Disneyland, you will feel like you are there. That was something I tried to put into it. And if you've been there, it'll make you feel like you want to go back. So thank you for putting me on the spot and giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. You need to be on the spot. You're published. That's a cool thing.
Thank you.
Kevin, are you still introducing your class with the where you hire the actor who reads the script and you have the whole line with the movie theater? Because I tried it, not this year, because there's no way that I could hype my class this year with the COVID expectations. So I was not going to hype my class.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I did it the year before, and it was really awesome. And I used your resource on Fiverr, and I hired an actor for $5 who read my almost exact script that I switched around a little bit for me. And I went to the movie theater, and I got them to donate a couple of the line organizers that could use it more at the movie theater, you know what I mean?
Cool.
So that they could have that experience. And then I blasted it down the hallway, and it was really cool.
So yes,
I did that kind of thing.
I did it 2 years ago. This year we were not on campus at all, so didn't do it this year. And next year I'm moving to 12th grade, so I'm going to have to redo all those videos.
Right.
But I am still planning to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're moving to such a, of course, 17, 18-year-olds, and you're going to do the same thing, and that'll be cool.
Yeah. At least that part will be the same, because I think that energy is still important. A lot of other things will change, but that first day, it just sets such a different tone. Like, this is not my class. So.
Would you, since I'm not the professional, I copied him, but would you tell everybody about that? And then I did my own version of this introduction. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's just, it's like the pre-ride safety videos that you'll get on any attraction, Disneyland, Six Flags, Universal. And I wrote my own script, and then I had a guy on Fiverr read it in the Patrick Warburton voice, which is from Soarin' Over the World. And so it introduces the class in sort of this epic sort of way. And then the video background, because I was teaching world history, I literally just used the ride video from Soarin' Over the World. So it goes through all the different regions while this guy is reading the background and setting the stage that the students are about to enter a time machine. They're not walking into a classroom, they're walking into a whole new adventure. And so it just from the jump really sets that off. And then I had a big poster outside that looks like a ride safety poster, but it lists all the class information and stuff like that. So it just feels different. And I wanted to get the stanchions, those ropes. I never pulled it off, but that's certainly
go to your local movie theater. That's what I did. I talked to the manager, and I got one. And then I was able to literally like at the movie theater when you're about to enter it, and I moved the little thingy that they have from side to side, and I went to the choir teacher, and I got their giant speakers that they use in the gym. And so it was really loud, and I blasted it down the hallway. And then I had posters like what you do, and I created those for my subject. And so as they were in the line, they would see those movie posters.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you for the inspiration.
Yes, Myra, I am moving to 12th grade government econ next year.
I teach that too.
That's a dream subject right there. Nice.
Well, Myra, if you teach it, then I'm going to put you on the spot, because where I'm really struggling is where I've always struggled. So 8th grade US, we've always taught Constitution, but I've been allowed to be fairly surface level. And now that I can't be surface level, how do you do, particularly like the minutia of the branches? How deep do you go in a 12th grade government course with that?
Well, I teach, well, this year I'll teach 5 subjects. So typically I teach 6 subjects. So, and this is a semester course that has an end of course exam that they take in mid-December.
Of course.
That tells you how much time I have. So I teach really basic. I don't go into the weeds on everything. I would say the Constitution is my main focus in the entire course. We look at each of I don't do I basically just do the branches. I don't do much about the amendments and the other articles, but I hit the amendments really hard. And as I'm moving this year from world history down to 8th grade, so I'll teach the through line. So I'll have, US 1, US 2, and government. So my goal is to build the foundation of the amendments and of that stuff, and then be able to bring that back in 12th grade. So I have to have them pass the test. So that's really what I do. I have a workbook that I base all my lectures off of, and we do a lot of interactive things, but they don't memorize like Supreme Court cases and anything like that. I just don't have time for it. I actually, because I have to be done pretty much, I have about a week and a half after Thanksgiving to breeze them through.
Yeah.
So, that's my sad tale.
Yeah, we have a semester and we don't have a test of any kind. There's not even a test for the department. I'm brand new to the department. That was the first question I asked, what is the assessment? And they're like, oh, we don't have one. Oh, okay. Well, that's good, I guess. I can do whatever I want, but.
Yeah, I've got lots of things I can share with you, of course, Kevin. I don't know if you'd want any of my stuff, but I got lots of stuff. And one of the things I did this year because of COVID is I took them outside and we did this thing called the Constitution investigation or something. And you go through and we got in a big circle and we went through each of them and we looked in the articles to find the answers together and we discussed it and why did this happen? And that was one thing that happened this year that I will forever do. It was just a great discussion. It was a great experience for them to pull in their prior knowledge. And that was right away in the year. So that's one of the things I did. It was like a scavenger hunt, I guess, if you will. You'd get to make questions for each of the articles and then go through them. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Anything you want to share?
I made this. I shared it, I'm sure, on Twitter, but it's Supreme Court cases and things like that, and the presidents. I can share that on here if you guys are interested. And I'll just go grab that and put it in the chat right now.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I just put a link for a bracket challenge. I actually got the idea. There's a New York Times article that I added in there, but this literally could be done with any different topic. So I created a list of 16 causes. I just assumed, and the kids were all wondering if there was some magic to my ranking. There really wasn't at all. I just started putting them on the board. I did put slavery on the top of one side and states' rights on the top of the other, really more than anything, just because I was these are probably the leading causes. But anyways, then I just kind of randomly put the rest of them on there. I found a random bracket that's in the Google Doc as well. And then my timing, I kind of outlined the plan that we had. It really took a lot longer than we thought. It was a solid 5 days of debating because it just seemed to take a lot longer and they needed time to review and prepare themselves. But the thing that I liked the most about the bracket challenge was that the kids really learned the causes. Oh my gosh, they knew them. I mean, because they heard some of them multiple times. And then they had to defend their cause against the other one that they were going against. And they were just, I mean, it was really interesting because when I switched to my test this year, I got rid of all my multiple choice tests except for the finals. And we did essay tests, which were revolving around a unit question. So at the beginning of the unit, they got their question. They knew the question that would be the test. They knew it the first day of the unit. And so we, started off with the unit question. And so this particular unit, it was something to do with like, what were all the things that contributed to the start of the war? And anyway, so we got going on it, and they were just killing it. And so then when the test came, you could tell in each class, usually slavery was still mentioned on the test, even though I don't think any of them ended with slavery as the leading cause. One of the groups, they were like, oh yeah, we have to defeat it early because it's going to win. And, they had all sorts of strategy. But anyway, so but on the test, like you could tell the one that they had heard the most, like one of the classes, well, all the kids, they put their cause, with the one that they had researched. So that was cool. And then they also were putting the ones that they had heard several times. But what really worked great was the final in English, the spring final. He actually incorporated that as well for them. So all of the effort that we had put into the bracket challenge came back into play there too. So anyway, I put a bunch of stuff on there, that's some details for it, but you could really modify those for any topic. I think I saw somebody else did a bracket challenge with like American history figures or something like that. I mean, you could do any number of things, but that's just the basics for that. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've done one with Chinese inventions with my 7th grade world, but you're right. It works with anything. You could do it with amendments. You could do it with Supreme Court cases. You could do it with any
That's
number.
what I was just going to say. With government, I would do court cases. And I saw somebody else put that together, I think, with the court cases as their topics. And I thought that was really a great idea. So
we just did it with reform movements, and kids love it. We had a March Madness tournament, and we made basketball uniforms. And so they designed their basketball uniform with a certain set of criteria that was in the rubric. And then we had our tournament where we were debating which reform movement made the most impact on America. And it was phenomenal. Yeah, their thinking is great.
The level of engagement for that week and a half was so high. I mean, they like ran in the room to see who they were debating against. And like, I was like, this is great. I want to keep this going. But so.
Have y'all done Socratic seminars, like pilot, co-pilot discussions also? Because that structure right there is just amazing, and it's awesome. And it gives kids that little safety net, as you know, with the pilot, co-pilot, when they have them on their wing as their little wingman and all that. So I always encourage that.
Well, and I had Gabe put on there on one of the online resources. Better Arguments. They sent me a thing. I did a pilot, whatever, for them, and it was really interesting. They've set it up for 6 class periods. Well, let me be honest, I didn't give 6 class periods, but I knocked it out in 2. And actually, I did it before the bracket challenge. But the whole idea was, which it almost conflicted with the whole bracket challenge, because obviously the idea for the bracket challenge was a winner. But principle number 1 in Better Arguments was, you should not have a winner. At the end, it's like, you're seeking to learn rather than to win. But so then the kids were like, well, how are we supposed to win? Okay, forget about it. You still got to try to do your best. But the Better Arguments thing was really great because it helped facilitate that kind of basics of like how to have good conversation. You're listening to learn rather than listening to win. You're trying to, accept the fact that we're all coming from different worldviews. So anyway, I had him put that in there because I thought it was pretty helpful.
When I tried to do any debate kind of stuff, whether it was Socratic seminar, usually we do philosophical chairs, which is very similar kind of deal. This year, doing it online just didn't work. Kids just wouldn't talk, wouldn't communicate.
It was so tricky.
So what I started doing, which actually ended up working so well, is I used a screen reader. I would have them type their arguments out, and then I had a screen reader read their arguments. And they had so much fun with that because it sounds terrible. Just this robot just sounds ridiculous. So kids were like jumping in front of the line. Oh, I want you to read mine, Mr. Roten, read mine, Mr. Roten. Kids who never spoke at all, just to have their little robot read it. It was such a cool little thing. So I'm going to have that in my back pocket, even when we're face-to-face next year. They're like, oh, nobody wants to talk? All right, somebody email me their response. I'll have the robot read it. Just to kick it off. It was such an easy thing. So I'll find the website and throw the link in chat, but such a cool little thing. It was Natural Readers, I'm pretty sure it was called, but I'll find it. Yeah.
Myra was asking in the chat about the pilot co-pilot discussions, so I'm going to explain it. Okay, so you pick your topic, like is Andrew Jackson a hero or a villain, or whatever it is that you want to do over the course of your content. And you take kids and you put them in a circle. You arrange the desks in a circle. The people that are in the inside circle, those are the pilots. And then you take the kids, and I usually put, depending on the size of the class, I have sometimes classes upwards of 34. And then I will put the desks behind them in another circle, on the outside circle. And sometimes I'll put 2 desks on the shoulder of my inside circle. Those are the wingman. And so you pose your question in whatever it is that you want to do. And the only people that are allowed to talk are the people who are in the inside circle. The people on the outside circle can only communicate with their pilot by sticky note or whatever it is you want to use. Like sometimes I have to just cut up paper. And so they can write things. So my instructions are always like, if your pilot is crashing and burning, and they're like, they don't have any ideas and they're just silent and, they don't have a good argument, then send them a sticky note and they'll talk about your sticky note. I always tell them to give their co-pilot credit. I'm always like, say, my co-pilot, Jessica, she says this, to make sure that they do that and give them credit for the topic. And so that's how it rolls. And then I put a timer and I'll go for 5 minutes and then we'll switch seats. And we'll go pilot, co-pilot, pilot, co-pilot. And that's the gist of it. And it's really, really awesome. The kids love it. And I always teach it with a non-history subject. I teach it with something like, let's talk about the food in the cafeteria, or something, whatever. Or describe the mall on a Friday night or something, whatever. And so I'll teach it non-history, whatever I think of, or something a little bit more controversial, like, what do you think about the dress code policy? And is it biased to girls? And so we'll teach it like that, and then we'll go to the history and dump that in, and it works really great.
I also add in on mine, and you can do this too. I have 8th graders, and sometimes they're emerging towards being fully independent, and it kind of depends on the class. You guys know how that is. But I'll say you can use contact air traffic control twice, and that's me. If they need help, they have to call in to air traffic control, and then I go and help them, and it just keeps the theme, and it gives them a little bit more freedom to ask for help, because they don't like saying, oh, I have a question, or I want to ask for help. So if they do it that way, it's still part of the game. They feel a little bit more comfortable, getting some help.
That's really awesome, Samantha. That's stolen, done.
So this year, I really am interested in doing a partnership with another 8th grade class, and I think there are several of them on here. Because I did this a few years ago. I had a partner class in Manila in the Philippines, and it was super fun because the kids did an assignment together. And so while my kids were asleep, other kids were working, and so they'd come and they'd have assignments done. So I thought, because everyone uses Google Docs nowadays, we could still do that, where they could do some kind of a slideshow or assignment, and their partner would be someone in another classroom. I'm looking for I have 130 kids, and I know across the hall, she's got 130. So anybody have a really big school they want to partner with me?
And I will probably have about the same-ish.
Where, and you're teaching, oh yeah, you're in Texas.
Yeah, I'm in Texas.
Okay,
Where are you?
I'm in Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jen, where are you at?
I'm in New York.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, I'm actually on Long Island. I'm not, in the city. I'm out on the outskirts of the city. But I was fully virtual this year for the whole year. And I have grade 8. And at one point I had 154 students. So, and we had all kinds of things going on all year. I mean, at this point now I have 90 students. I lost, 64 students. I gained about, as I was losing, I was gaining, and I had kids in February that I was, having to retrain, and my kids that went from me to all other teams in the building, and then they had huge learning gaps because I might have been on World War I and they were already on the Great Depression, so they missed the 20s, they missed, just all kinds of craziness going on in my building this year. But it's funny that you say that. I actually did something with the school this year in Florida, a history symposium, where it was 11th grade APUSH kids and my grade 8 kids, and we got together, and it was during February, so we had this big conversation about Black history, about social justice, about creating community, bridging gaps, and it was really a great conversation because my district on Long Island is 70% minority, and the district that I was doing this project with they're like 95% white. So it was really this great conversation between not only two different levels, but two completely different groups of kids sharing their experiences. The one school, the older kids were talking about how they could better incorporate diversity and Black history into their school community. Mine talked about things that we already did, but things that they felt that they really wanted to do better. And so we had this whole big conversation going, and it was really great. I also partnered with a school in New Jersey, my grade 8 kids with 7th grade kids, talking about public service announcements, difference in between public service announcements and propaganda. They did a public service announcements project, and my students basically critiqued their public service announcements, but in such a way that they talked about what they liked the best and how effective they felt their messages were, and how they could basically help them to make their messages better so that they could reach a wider array of people. And that was with an English class. So it was social studies, English, and then I did, like I said, the other group, they were older, they were high school. So I tried to really because my kids were virtual, they had very, very limited socialization. Their life as they knew it was their living room, their couch, their 4 walls of their house. So my job for this year was not only teaching them content, but it was basically bringing the outside world into them because they'd had none of that. It was just a very difficult, very different year for them. But it wound up being a really amazing year in the end. I mean, I did some really great things with them. And to your point, things that I would hope to continue as I go back, face to face. People talk about, the crazy tragedy virtual learning was, and I agree with a lot of the criticisms of it, but certainly I think there are a ton of silver linings as we look to kind of recreate what we would hope new normal in education would look like. And I think that things like this are fabulous. I mean, I found Gabe because of the shutdown. I would never even have known him if it wasn't for COVID, and got to meet so many great people and know so many great educators on Twitter, and have become so much better myself, which has helped me to better help my kids. So it's a lot of good life lessons in there, and I think that when we can share that with our students, it helps everybody, it benefits everybody.
I have to leave to go to baseball. But I wanted to just say, since I have several of you on here that I connect with on Twitter, I cannot tell you how helpful it has been to partner on Twitter and Facebook, because I just feel like I'm so much better having connected with all of you guys. Your ideas are so great and it's so helpful. And anyway, thank you. And thanks for doing this, Gabe.
You're welcome. To your point, Jennifer, can y'all hear me? Come on.
Yeah, no, I can hear you. I just was going to mention, I just dropped something in the chat, Gabe, if you wanted to pull it up and look at it. It was going to be my big share for tonight. But yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Susan, right?
No, it's okay. No problem. I just think that I don't really subscribe to the philosophy that there was a lot of learning loss But I think that it was replaced, their learning loss was replaced by new skills and some skills that are going to be really valuable. You know, we think that students they've always said that they're digital natives, and are they really? They know how to use their thumbs. But really, we've been able to use technology and have gotten not only students caught up to where we should be, but for teachers to be able to get caught up. And we have forced teachers who have been reluctant to use technology to get caught up to where they should be, to use our devices the way they were meant to be used. You know, and so I think there's a lot we've accomplished a lot this year. And so I think that we're probably gained more than what we've lost, really, even though, you know, it was kind of a sorry year for all of us. So I really look forward to kids being able to use these new skills and to use them in ways that are beneficial for learning.
I don't know if the same is true where you all teach, but where I teach, basically this year, it was like, experiment, anything goes, get these kids to learn. And it actually turned out to be really, really good, because there were things that like I would have questioned or maybe not have been like, or people would have questioned what I was doing, where this year it was like, oh, great. Yeah, try it. So I mean, if silver linings are kind of where we are, and our district or our school was calling them like wins, losses, and ties. And those of us who hear the word learning loss are like, no, not really. It's just new. It's a new way to learn. And our biggest fear, and actually I have an article that I can share with all of you if you'd like to read it, is like going right back to the way things were when there's so much potential for it to be so new and different.
And I think so many people are going to go right back. I've already had people on my campus say, I'm going back to my paper. I need my paper. You know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
that actually scares me.
Yeah, the minute that my district had the kids come back, you know, brought all the kids back who wanted to come back, because like I said, I was fully virtual. So we had, you know, fully virtual, and then we had in person, and they got rid of hybrid in the middle of the year. But to your point, it was like, as soon as the kids were all back in, those teachers, it was right back to the packets, right back to the paper, right back to everything they were doing before, because they already had decided from the shutdown that they were burnt. They didn't want anything to do with the computer, nothing to do with virtual. Some teachers weren't even turning their cameras on when they were supposed to have live kids at home. They would leave their cameras off. Then the kids would leave their cameras off. Then I would listen to these constant chronic complaints about, well, these kids at home aren't vested. These kids at home don't turn their cameras on. And it's like, well, do you turn your camera on? And you know, I would hear from other people that, you know, this, you know, so-and-so doesn't turn their camera on, or I would hear from parents of kids that would go from hybrid or in-person to virtual. Well, this teacher's not turning their camera on, and this teacher's not teaching, and this teacher doesn't even talk to the kids that are at home. And, you know, it's like, yeah, it just kind of, I feel like this was, to Cheryl's point, you know, this was our mission this year. It was sort of like anything goes, but as educators, it was our job to be all in. It was our job to try to figure out how to reach every child, you know, and there are so many resources that we have. I mean, and Twitter and all of you guys and many other educators like you, again, like, I don't know what I would have done without you. I was kind of tech savvy, I think, before I found everyone, before I found the PLN, but some of the things that I've done this year, and I just continue to love to meet everyone and grow and get ideas and see how I can adapt them and do my own thing with them, and then share back, you know, take what I did and share it back. And whenever I'm sharing with someone, I'm always encouraging other people to do that as well. You know, I always get questions about, you know, oh, could you take this and do it with a group of kids? Could you take this and do breakout rooms with it? Could you? And the answer is yes. You know, you can do anything with these things. You can. And if somebody does something with something I've created and they do something great with it, come back and tell me, because I want to know. Heck, you know, I want to try it. So I agree with you. I think going back to normal, if you will want to call it that, I mean, I think it's a huge disservice, because it negates everything that we've been through and everything we've built together as an educational community.
And I think the other thing too that kind of is getting lost in some of this conversation is, what about the kids that did very well in a remote model. I mean, I had kids that came back for about 3 days and then went back to remote because they were just like, I like working at my own pace. I like being able to kind of explore things deeper. So at the end of the year, I had probably 5 kids total that were completely remote, not because of necessarily like COVID fears or having vulnerable people in their households, but just because they all decided for themselves, it was really kind of interesting that they wanted to be remote because they felt it worked better for them. So that's kind of an interesting perspective too, I think, that I don't think a lot of people are taking into consideration.
Great. We have Annie Evans, map maker, and she's with New American Histories and Monk History from University of Richmond, and hopefully she's ready to share resources. I know she has a lot of amazing maps and different projects that they're working on.
Thank you, Gabriel. You are always very kind. Hi, guys. So some of us are out of school. I'm 12 months, so, but like my neighborhood where I live has been out since Memorial Day, but literally an hour away in Richmond where our university is located, they don't get out until June 24th. And so it's really crazy because I work with teachers all across the state and across the country like you guys. And so it's always fun to listen to when are people out. And some people have been on vacation for a month already and some aren't even out yet. But for those who don't know me, I work at U of R and I work with a historian named Ed Ayers, if you're not familiar with Ed's work. And about 2 years ago, he approached me about leaving. I was in the Charlottesville City Schools here in Virginia as a social studies coordinator for 10 years. And before that, I taught 21 years of middle school US history and geography and civics. So now he has a website that he calls New American History, and it's kind of his goal to help K-12 schools. So everything that we make is free. That was actually part of my negotiating, which it was always going to be free, but it's kind of a joke between us because I hate paywalls and I hate when somebody gives teachers a tool like Newsella for 3 to 5 years and then all of a sudden it's $15,000 for your school, you know? And so I have no patience with that sort of thing. So now I literally get to focus 100% on making things for teachers that they need. So if there's something that you are teaching this coming year and you don't have great resources, if you let me know, I will do my best to try and create those resources and they will be free. Everything's digital, it's web-based, there's no logins, there's no sign-ins. Like we try and make it as easy as possible. I did present last summer, so I don't want to bore people if everybody's already seen Bunk or everybody's already seen it. But if there are folks that haven't, I'm happy to kind of share that. Or if everybody's a little bit familiar with our work, then I can just share some of the more recent stuff. So like I know Cheryl Ann and Carol Lee and Gabe were familiar, and Jennifer, I think you were there last summer. So you've seen Bunk and you've seen Panorama and you've seen our learning resources. But you know, Susan and Samantha, I can't remember if you guys were there last summer. I apologize.
I would love to see it.
Okay, I'll just give a really quick tour. So our website is newamericanhistory.org, and I'll share my screen. Okay, can y'all see my screen? Okay, so this is our basic website. I'm gonna minimize y'all's lovely faces. And so we change this up every month. We just changed it about a week ago, so this will probably stay up until July now. But there's always a blog post from Ed. A lot of these, I've had teachers tell me that they actually use these blogs as read alouds in their class or as kind of a flipped classroom kind of thing, have the kids read it the night before. But for teachers, particularly right now, and you guys were describing like, I'm not allowed to teach this, or I would be fired if I taught that. If you go back through the last few blogs that he's posted, they really do kind of make the case for why that's a dangerous way to approach history. He's come out very strongly on that topic, as you might imagine. Another thing that we have is this new section called New Ideas in American History. And that's where we're trying to amplify the voices of younger scholars, historians that don't have like a 6-figure book deal like John Meacham with every book that comes out. So we're trying to kind of pull out voices of different historians that might not normally get recognition, have a big book tour. So there's a few of those already in the queue. That's something we just started about 10 months ago. My learning resources are always featured down here at the bottom. Ed has a PBS series. The first 2 seasons are on PBS, and they play pretty frequently. They're 27-minute long episodes. All of them are available for free on PBS, unlike the things that are usually behind a paywall, because that's part of his deal with them. And we've developed learning resources for most of those episodes. There's a few that will be posted this summer, but most of them are up there now. And then we have Bunk. So I'm going to go ahead and go out to Bunk. And this month, because it's Pride Month, we had what we call a Bunk tag on queer identity. But if we start on the Bunk homepage, this changes every day. In fact, it's already changed since this morning because I was presenting at a statewide conference and some of these things were not on there this morning. And so the idea is we're constantly curating print media, video, audio, we have over 500 sources, things from the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune, and Atlantic Monthly, to smaller websites like the Nib that feature graphic novel versions of history. And so when you guys were talking about looking for things for court cases or to teach judicial review, I actually just typed in judicial review. And so here is, as of today, we have 18 separate pieces of content just on the topic of judicial review. So if I click on one of those, here's the excerpt. It's an article from Law and Political Economies. That's a pretty heavy duty law related magazine that most of us don't read for fun. But over here, you see like a stack of cards, and there'll be different icons that will pop up as you go through those. These are all articles or other pieces of content, videos, maps, audio, that have something to do with that article's same idea. And as you click through the connections, other tags come up. You can click on those. If you're really into legal history, we have 145 pieces of content on legal history. You can go back. If you just want your kids to read 2 articles, you can hit this share connection button, and it gives you a hyperlink that just has them looking at those 2 specific articles. A lot of teachers start off in the morning and tell the kids to get on Bunk when they used to do CNN 10, or they used to read the newspaper while the teacher was getting stuff up and running. Some people say, share a Bunk connection with your neighbor, right? Go into Bunk, find a topic you're interested on, and share that connection with your neighbor. So that's one way that people have used it. Other people will say, can you think of another tag that these 2 articles have in common after you've read both of them? And kids love creating a new tag, finding a new connection. So as you go through, you notice the different types of connections also change. So that's Bunk.
Can it be filtered by like age level or Lexile level? Because my 6th
It is
graders
not
often-
Lexiled now like my learning resources are, Gabe. We are working on trying to add immersive reader. That's actually in the works, so that if it's something that, someone's struggling with reading level, it'll do the read aloud for them. The other thing that I have a lot of teachers that have students with reading disabilities, they'll cut and paste the article into Rewordify. And if you guys haven't used Rewordify, it's a great free tool. Hopefully it will stay free, where it kind of rewrites the passage for you into a little bit simpler Lexile level. And so in all of our learning resources that we create, we have directions on how to do that. Like we'll say, if your student is using Bunk and this article is too high of a reading level for them to access, consider having them put it into Rewordify. That way they can still participate in the discussion with the other kids who are reading on grade level, right? And that way it's a little bit more accessible for them. We also are trying to start embedding more articles that are on a little bit of a younger reading level. For example, of all places, 17 magazine. Like when I was a kid, when I was a middle school girl, we loved 17 magazine, but I never would have thought of that as a news source. But they've actually been doing a very good job with promoting social justice issues for young women. And so we've started putting a few of their articles in there. Our Bunk editor, Tony, didn't like it at first. He said, oh, Annie's turning my Bunk into a teeny bopper. But then after he read a few of them, he's like, wow, these are actually pretty good. And he has a journalism background. So at first he wasn't having it. But now he's like, okay, if Annie says it's Bunk worthy, I guess it is. So it's kind of a running joke with us. But does anybody else have thoughts on how you might use something like that? You can also build a collection. where you can curate, 3 to 5 articles, or and push it out as an assignment where you pre-select them, or you can have the students go out and create one. So when you were saying they had to defend a position, they could create 3 to 5 articles for their position. Someone else could create a separate one. And the way they do that is they go into the article and there's this little button that says add to collection, and they can annotate it. They can summarize it, or you can give them, what do you want them to do in there? Or you can create it where you pick 3 to 5 articles, you type the questions in and push it out to them as an assignment. It gives you a unique URL that you can embed in your Canvas or Schoology course.
I love this idea for looking at either you can do building cause and effects for the students. So if you're, for example, looking at something like World War I, where you have almost anything could be kind of an effect of something related to World War I, they could kind of create their own collection with that, with different articles, and then have to explain those connections. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, something like
201
that.
pieces of content. Is that enough for you, Samantha?
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
And the other thing, there is somewhere on here, it says if you find, something that, recommend a resource. So if you guys have something that you use a lot, now I will say Tony is not a teacher. He's a journalist. He has a journalism background and produced the Backstory podcast. I don't know if you guys ever listened to that, but Ed was the host of that along with Joanne Freeman, and Carolee and I are Joanne fans from her Thursday, Friday morning NCHE talk, Coffee Matters. But so all of those have been archived on our website as well. All the past episodes, because that podcast ran for like 12 years. It just ended last July. So we have all that now on our site archived, and with new search features, so you can quickly access in segments. You don't have to use the whole hour. You don't have to fast forward to try and find the part you want. I made them break them all up into segments and build us an archive so teachers could have it quick and just use the little piece that they want. So we also have maps. So the folks that we're talking about needing, wanting to have something with a map. Someone earlier mentioned something about a map of something. American Panorama is our digital atlas. Most people by now, in the last year and a half, this Mapping Inequality, is kind of everywhere. I literally cannot pick up a newspaper or a magazine and not find somebody citing it or referencing it. I'm a nerd, so I check the stats kind of behind the scenes. This map had 6.7 thousand hits yesterday alone. It had over 1 million hits as of July 1st last year. So the map is showing redlining across the country. We have 3 other maps related to this. One is on urban renewal, so it shows all the communities that, redlining was in the late 30s, early 40s. The next map is called the next map is called Renewing Inequality. It shows how when they built the US highway system, bulldozing through, you got it, mostly the red line neighborhoods and displacing all these families. And that's really when you start seeing the term homeless pop up, because these people were displaced and had nowhere to go. And that's when the homeless issue became a huge issue across the country. It really was because of what was done to build the highway system. This year, we released 2 new companion maps. One of them is called Not Even Past, and it shows all of the health effects of people living consistently in a red line neighborhood. So it uses something called the Social Vulnerability Index. So they take all the medical data. People who have cancer, people who have asthma, people who have obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease. And that all, again, stems from living in these areas where you have food deserts. You can't get to a grocery store if you don't have transportation. And then when COVID hit, of course, we also saw the high mortality rates in those previously red line neighborhoods. And then the last map, we've been working with the Science Museum here in Virginia. They've done a heat map across the country. You might have seen the article. It was a visualization in the New York Times last summer about formerly red line neighborhoods and how they're literally boiling. Like, they are so hot in the summer because, the green neighborhoods and the blue neighborhoods were built with landscaping and parks and shade trees. And the other neighborhoods, it's all asphalt and concrete, and they absorb that heat all day, especially in the summer. And I know when I was a kid, I remember there was a blackout in Chicago and they lost power for like 10 days. I remember I was like 9 years old and they were talking about all these elderly people who died because they literally sweltered to death in their apartments because the landlord had the windows barred shut for high crime areas and they couldn't even open the windows. And then they didn't have any, they couldn't even have a fan on. They didn't even have central air. And all these senior citizens were dying. And I was asking my mom, like, why? Like, how can they glue the windows shut? And she was trying to explain it to me. But when you see these maps, it just makes it all like really concrete. And when you click on cities, these are the original maps where they rated things, but then you can see these area descriptions over here. And when you click on the different levels, this is actually what people wrote. So these happen to be green. I can switch to red. And it's just horrible things that are written in there. And people are like, this is our government writing these things. You can't hide from it. You can't run from it. I know someone was saying they get in trouble if they teach that. Again, I'm just teaching the facts. This is your federal government. Your dollars paid for these surveys. These are people that our federal government hired to rate these neighborhoods, and everything that happened after that stems back to the decisions and judgments that these folks made. So I don't tell them what to think. The kids come to that conclusion themselves. I don't have to tell them. It's pretty obvious. So I put all these tools into learning resources. The one that we featured this week in my newsletter. I don't know if you guys have heard about the civic season, if you've seen that hashtag a lot lately, but they launched it on Monday. A bunch of museums across the country that we've partnered with. The Smithsonian is kind of spearheading it, the Made by Us Coalition. But the idea is to start kind of a new summer tradition as kids are getting out of school, starting with Flag Day, which was Monday, through Juneteenth, all the way to 4th of July, kind of reimagining what is a holiday and what do we celebrate and who do we celebrate and why do we celebrate it? And I love this idea because they're not just saying like, go to a museum or go to a park, which I hope they all will because they've been cooped up for a year and a half, but also like engage online. And so we took some of the different tools that they made and kind of created different learning resources to engage kids to be thinking about this. The teacher view looks really boring in the beginning and we're trying to think of a way to do a pop-out window, but these are all the teacher tips. Like, I don't want to give these up because especially novice teachers are like, no, like you tell me how to teach this. I've never taught before. Please keep all that stuff in there. Like there's Rewordify and explains how to use it. People that never used a Padlet or a Jamboard before don't know about See, Think, Wonder strategies. So we try to embed all that. Why do we use the 5 E's instructional model? Because it's inquiry based and that's what we're trying to promote, kids. But we do use that model. Everything is embedded in there. So they have this beautiful graphic and everything on the rest of this is built on that. But we're embedding all of the like Project Zero strategies and everything you need is already embedded. You don't have to go out there and link this and find that and have 15 different Google Docs and put the slides together because we did all that for y'all because y'all don't have time to do that. So you say, Annie, I need something on this, and then I'll work on it, and hopefully we'll get it up there. I can't do it overnight. I mean, it takes time to make this stuff, but that's why over the summer, if you think, here's something we have nothing to use, like we have no great resources on this topic. If you email those to me or put them up in the Social Studies Network on Gabe's group, we can start working on it. And to that, we are crowdsourcing right now a list of maps. I want a wish list. What are the digital maps you wish you had to teach with next year? They won't be as elaborate as Mapping Inequality because those take a long time to build. We're still going to build great ones like that. The young lady from Kansas City, I can't think of her name, I'm so sorry, that just left us. What was her name, Gabe? I think her last name was Kenner.
Laura McFerrin, I believe.
Okay, I totally botched that one. Okay, so she was talking about like the branches. So we have one called Electing the House where you can click on it and literally drill down to every single House of Representatives election from 1850 to the 2018 midterms, right? We're in the process of loading the 2020 stuff now. They're making me a presidential one that's that elaborate where they can drill down and see presidential elections the same way. They have promised me it will be done before school starts. I told them I need it by August 1st because some people go back to school August 1st. But that has been one I've been asking for the last 2 years. So you'll now have something to teach presidential and something to teach judicial with that I think is a really rich resource. So no matter where y'all live, every kid can click on their exact district, their voting district. They can see patterns. Did we used to be Republican? Did we used to be Democrat? Have we flipped back and forth, meaning we're purple now, and all those kinds of things. And they can read about who were the people and what were the trends, like why did this party all of a sudden flip to that one? And so that's a really fun one to drill down to. These are migration ones. There's 2 of the 3 have been posted. Dr. Ayers' newest book was on migration, the Great Migration, but he goes all the way back to indigenous people and brings it all the way up to COVID. So this is kind of the middle one. So clips from the show are embedded in there. This is at Fort Monroe. It talks about the contraband decision during the Civil War. And then we look at the maps. There's 100 color maps in the book. We have most of those embedded in a story map. There's a cool slider tool. So this will take you out to the story map. But those directions kind of tell the kids which part of the map to navigate to. But then they can go out to the live map and they can go through it at their own pace and they can explore. And some pieces of this are animated, so they'll start to move and the kids can read through and learn about the contraband decision. In the previous map, it was showing how the indigenous people got pushed off the land. Now we're seeing how people are escaping and going to this contraband camp at Fort Monroe, and the Union Army protects them. So it's a lot. Great, rich resources. We're trying to build things to help guide the kids through. We'd love your feedback. I don't know what else to, I mean, I could go on all night, but I hope you'll explore it all. Gabe's, I think, got links in the Wakelet. I can come into your classroom virtually. I can do PD with your team through Zoom. I am going to go out to California, though. I'm going to go to Carolee's class this year. I am bound and determined to find an excuse to get out there. And Gabriel, I'll see if I can hit Texas while I'm at it, because we've been trying for the last 2 years. And I'm very lucky, and I realize that because Dr. Ayers has money for me to travel, and he wants me to do conferences and presentations. And 100% of my time is focused on building stuff for y'all. That's literally my job description. What do you need? Tell us what you need. We will do our best to build it, and we will never charge for it. So to me, that is Disney World. You know, that Kevin was talking about Disney World. To me, this job is Disney World for teachers.
That's so cool, Annie. I'm so inspired right now. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, I love what I do. And when you love what you do, you don't have to call it work, right?
So true.
All right, well, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for sharing. I've been sharing the link. I'll go ahead and render the video, and then I'll add it to the Wakelet. Next week, for those of you who are interested, we're going to be doing a session on world history as well.